Right now, as you're watching this, two of the most powerful nations on earth are doing something they don't want you to fully understand. China and Russia have been accumulating gold at a pace that hasn't been seen in modern history. Not gradually, not casually, aggressively, systematically, relentlessly. And here's what should concern you. They're not buying gold because they think it's a good investment. They're buying gold because they know something is coming, something they've been preparing for while the rest of the world was distracted by stock prices and inflation numbers. By the time most people realize what this gold accumulation actually means, the window to act will already be closed. This isn't speculation. This is happening in plain sight, and yet almost nobody is talking about why. Let's start with what you're supposed to believe. The official story goes something like this. China and Russia are simply diversifying their reserves. Every central bank holds a mix of assets. Some hold dollars, some hold euros, some hold gold. It's just standard practice. Nothing to see here. The financial media frames this as routine portfolio management. Smart countries don't keep all their eggs in one basket, they say. Russia has faced sanctions, so naturally they want alternatives to Western currencies. China has a massive economy, so of course they'd want a balanced reserve. It all sounds reasonable. It all sounds boring, and that's exactly how they want it to sound. But here's the problem with that explanation. If this were just diversification, the numbers wouldn't look like this. If this were just about hedging risk, the behavior would be different. What China and Russia are doing goes far beyond what any normal central bank would consider a prudent portfolio allocation. The scale is wrong, the timing is wrong, the secrecy is wrong, and when you dig into the details, you start to realize that the official story isn't just incomplete. It's designed to keep you from asking the real questions. What most people don't realize is that China stopped reporting its true gold purchases years ago. The numbers they officially released to the International Monetary Fund are almost certainly a fraction of what they're actually accumulating. We know this because of import data. We know this because of mining output. We know this because gold is flowing into China and not coming back out. Analysts who track physical gold movement estimate that China's real holdings could be 3, 4, maybe 5 times higher than what they officially claim. And they're not hiding this by accident. They're hiding it because they don't want the world to know how much they actually have. Not yet. Russia has been more transparent, but only because sanctions forced them into the open. After 2014, when the West froze Russian assets and cut them off from the dollar system, Russia began converting their reserves into gold at an unprecedented rate. They sold off U.S. Treasury bonds by the hundreds of billions and bought physical gold instead. By 2020, Russia's gold reserves had more than doubled, and they haven't stopped. Even under the weight of the most aggressive sanctions in modern history, Russia has continued accumulating. They found ways to buy through intermediaries, through allied nations, through channels that don't show up in official reports. The message is clear. Russia would rather hold gold than dollars, and they're willing to go to extreme lengths to make that happen. Now ask yourself a question. Why would two of the most strategically minded nations on earth go to such effort, take such risks, spend such resources just to hold a metal that mainstream economists call a barbarous relic? Why would they do this if gold was really as irrelevant as Wall Street wants you to believe? This is the part that changes everything. China and Russia aren't stockpiling gold because they think it's a good store of value. They're stockpiling gold because they're building an alternative system, a system that doesn't depend on the US dollar, a system that can't be controlled by Western central banks, a system that will still function when the current one breaks. For the last 80 years, the global financial order has been built on a single foundation, the dollar. Every major commodity is priced in dollars. Every international trade settlement flows through dollar-denominated systems. Every central bank on earth holds dollar reserves because they have to, not because they want to, because the system requires it. This gives the United States extraordinary power, the ability to print the world's reserve currency, the ability to sanction any nation out of the global economy, the ability to export inflation while importing goods. This is the exorbitant privilege that allows America to run endless deficits without immediate consequences. China and Russia understand this better than anyone. They've watched what happens to countries that challenge dollar dominance. They've seen nations destroyed, leaders overthrown, economies collapsed, and they've decided they're not going to wait for that to happen to them. The gold they're buying isn't just metal, it's insurance, it's leverage, it's a weapon. Here's how this works. Gold is the only financial asset that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. When you hold dollars, you're dependent on the Federal Reserve. When you hold Treasury bonds, you're dependent on the U.S. government's ability to pay. When you hold gold, you're dependent on no one. It can't be frozen, it can't be sanctioned, it can't be printed into worthlessness. In a world where the rules of finance are set by your adversary, gold is the only asset that sits outside their control. China knows this, Russia knows this, and they've been acting on this knowledge for over a decade while the Western public was told that gold was outdated, irrelevant, a bad investment compared to stocks and bonds. But the accumulation is only half the story. The other half is what they're planning to do with it. There's been growing evidence that China and Russia, along with other BRICS nations, are working toward a new monetary framework, a framework that doesn't rely on the dollar, a framework that may be partially backed by gold. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is openly discussed at BRICS summits. This is written about in their official communications. The only question is timing. What most analysts miss is that this transition doesn't require a dramatic announcement. It doesn't require a gold-backed currency that the West would immediately try to destroy. All it requires is a slow, steady shift in how international trade is settled. If China pays Russia for oil in yuan, and that yuan is implicitly backed by China's gold reserves, the dollar becomes less necessary. If Saudi Arabia accepts yuan for oil, and China offers gold conversion for large holders, the petrodollar system begins to unravel. If enough nations decide they'd rather hold gold than dollars, the demand that has propped up the dollar for decades starts to disappear. This is where it gets dangerous. The United States has built its entire economic model on the assumption that the world will always want dollars, the endless deficits, the military spending, the entitlement programs, the debt that now exceeds $34 trillion. All of it is only possible because foreign nations are willing to hold and use dollars. The moment that demand weakens, the moment alternatives emerge, the entire structure comes under stress. And here's what the financial media won't tell you. That moment isn't coming. It's already here. De-dollarization is not a theory. It's a trend that has been accelerating for years. The dollar's share of global reserves has been declining steadily. Central banks around the world bought more gold in 2022 and 2023 than any time since the 1960s. Nations that once held nearly all their reserves in dollars are quietly shifting into gold, yuan, and other alternatives. The pace of this shift is increasing, not decreasing. Why this time is different from every other time someone predicted the dollar's decline is simple. This time there's coordination. In the past, individual nations that challenged the dollar did so alone, and they were crushed. Libya tried to create a gold-backed African currency. Iraq tried to sell oil in euros. We know how those stories ended, but China and Russia aren't Libya. They aren't Iraq. They have nuclear weapons. They have massive economies. They have the ability to actually build and sustain an alternative system. And most importantly, they have each other. The partnership between China and Russia has deepened to levels that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. They're trading in their own currencies. They're building payment systems outside of Western control. They're coordinating their gold purchases to avoid spiking prices before they're ready. And they're doing all of this while the United States is distracted by internal division and foreign entanglements. What's happening is a slow-motion financial realignment that will reshape the global order. The question isn't if this will impact the dollar. The question is when. And by the time it becomes obvious to the average person, the transition will already be well underway. Let me explain why the gold specifically matters in this equation. There's a theory among some monetary historians that gold never really left the monetary system. It was just hidden. When Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, the official link between gold and the dollar was severed. But central banks didn't stop holding gold. In fact, the largest holders of gold in the world are still central banks. The United States alone claims to hold over 8,000 tons. Germany, Italy, France, all major holders. If gold was truly irrelevant, if it was really just a barbarous relic with no monetary role, why would these institutions continue to hold it? Why would they guard it so carefully? Why would they go to such lengths to maintain these reserves? The answer is that gold still anchors the system, just not officially. It's the asset of last resort, the thing you hold when you don't trust anything else. And right now, trust is breaking down. China and Russia are positioning themselves for a world where trust in Western institutions collapses. They're betting that the current system built on debt, built on confidence, built on the assumption that America will always honor its obligations, is approaching its limit. And when that limit is reached, whoever holds the gold will hold the power. This is the detail that most people miss. Gold isn't just about preserving wealth. At the sovereign level, gold is about power. The nation that holds the most gold has the strongest position in any monetary reset. If the dollar loses its reserve status, if a new system has to be negotiated, the countries with the largest gold reserves will dictate the terms. China and Russia know this. They're not just preparing for a crisis, they're preparing to win the crisis. Now let's talk about what's happening right now that most people don't see. The physical gold market is under unprecedented stress. For years, the price of gold has been heavily influenced by paper markets. Futures contracts, ETFs, derivative instruments that represent gold without actually being gold. These paper markets allow for massive amounts of gold to be traded without any physical metal changing hands. This has kept prices suppressed even as physical demand has surged, but there's a limit to how long this can continue. When central banks buy gold, they want physical metal. They don't want a paper claim. They don't want a promise. They want bars in a vault that they control. And as demand for physical gold from nations like China and Russia has increased, the available supply has tightened, mints are struggling to keep up with demand, delivery times have extended, premiums over spot price have risen, the physical market is sending signals that the paper market is ignoring. At some point, these two realities will have to reconcile, and when they do, the price adjustment could be violent. This is where the manipulation becomes impossible to hide. If you have 100 ounces of physical gold, but you've sold paper claims on 1,000 ounces, you can maintain the illusion only as long as no one asks for delivery all at once. The moment confidence breaks, the moment enough buyers demand physical metal, the game is over. The price explodes, the paper contracts become worthless, and whoever was holding real gold suddenly holds real power. China and Russia are playing this long game. They're accumulating physical gold while the West plays paper games. They're draining the supply while prices are still suppressed. And when the suppression finally fails, they'll be holding the asset that everyone suddenly needs but can no longer get. By the time this is obvious, it's too late. Let me tell you what comes next. The first thing to watch is the continued decline of dollar usage in international trade. This is already accelerating. More nations are settling trade in yuan, in rupees, in rubles. Each transaction that bypasses the dollar is a small crack in the foundation. Enough cracks, and the structure weakens. The second thing to watch is the price of gold in relation to physical supply. When premiums rise, when delivery delays extend, when mints start rationing, these are signals that the paper price is disconnecting from reality. We've seen glimpses of this already. It will get worse. The third thing to watch is the response of Western central banks. If they start buying gold aggressively, if they suddenly reverse decades of rhetoric about gold being irrelevant, you'll know the game is changing. Right now, Western central banks are not significant buyers. That could change quickly, and when it does, the price will already be running. The fourth thing to watch is any announcement related to gold from China. They've been silent about their true holdings for years. At some point, they'll reveal the real number. And that announcement will be timed strategically. It will be designed to maximize impact. It will be designed to shake confidence in the dollar system at the exact moment that serves their interests. This isn't a game between investors. This is a game between empires. And you're not just watching it, you're living through it. The mainstream financial media will continue to tell you that gold is outdated. They'll continue to tell you that the dollar is safe. They'll continue to mock anyone who suggests that the current system might be vulnerable. This is their job. This is what they do. But their reassurances don't change what's happening in the real world. They don't change the fact that nations are acting in ways that contradict everything the media claims. When Russia was cut off from the dollar system, they didn't collapse. They turned to gold. They turned to alternative systems. They survived. That was a message to every other nation on earth, a message that says the dollar's power can be resisted, that there is another way, and more nations are listening. The world is fracturing into blocks, one built on the dollar, on Western institutions, on the existing rules, another built on gold, on new alliances, on the rejection of American financial hegemony. This fracture is accelerating, and the gold accumulation you're seeing from China and Russia is both a symptom and a cause. Here's the final truth that no one wants to say out loud. The system we grew up with, the system that has defined global finance for our entire lives, is changing. Not might change, not could change, is changing right now. The only question is whether the transition is gradual or sudden, whether it's managed or chaotic, whether you're prepared or caught off guard. China and Russia have made their choice. They've decided to hold the one asset that has been money for thousands of years. The one asset that survives empires and outlasts currencies, the one asset that can't be printed, can't be deleted, can't be sanctioned out of existence. They're betting that when the dust settles, whoever holds the gold makes the rules. And while they accumulate, while they prepare, while they position themselves for what's coming, most people in the West are told not to worry, told that the dollar is safe, told that gold is a relic, told to trust the system. But the nations with the longest memories and the clearest view of history aren't trusting the system. They're exiting it quietly, systematically, with gold. What you do with this information is your decision. But understand this, what's happening is not a drill. It's not a theory. It's a strategic move by nuclear powers who believe the current order is ending, and they're making sure they're on the right side of that ending. The question you should ask yourself is simple. If the two most strategically minded nations on Earth are moving into gold as fast as they can, what do they see that you don't? And why is no one on television telling you to pay attention? By the time the answer is obvious, it won't matter anymore. Thank you for watching this video.